morning. Sorry about that clusterfuck. Turns out, right, that my iMac doesn't work with Google Drive. This is my frustration with Apple, which is, I hope the sound isn't too loud, but my frustration with Apple is that this whole planned obsolescence thing. I've put this thing like an old iMac, right? It's a 2011 iMac. But it's really fully spec'd. If you look at it, it's still an i5. It's still got it's got 32 megs of RAM or gigs. Are we still in megs or gigs with RAM? I don't know. Whatever. It's got all of the good stuff. But what they do is at some point they stop making the computer compatible with the new OS, and then everyone updates their stuff to be compatible with the OS, and then you can't install certain software. So it doesn't work with Google Drive, and some of the assets from my intro are on Google Drive, and because I switched, it's like a disaster. But I'm going to wipe this thing, put Windows on it, and that should fix it. Shut up, Windows bros. Windows is great for Macs that are out of date. How's that sound? I just can't afford to buy a brand new expensive Mac. Otherwise I would do that. But maybe one day I'll get a sugar daddy or something. I don't know. But that's where I'm going today, which is, it's very interesting. I have optimism. Okay. Now, I've also taken my ADD meds for the first time with the new drugs for my pain, and they seem to have made me a little bit high. So if I'm a little bit stoner, that's what it is. But I'm not too bad. I'm all right. My brain still works at fucking 150% of everyone else's brain, even when I'm stoned. So it's good. So let's mix stimulants and Lyrica together. Good job, Tay. It's good. No, it's fine. But I think it's really important. One of the things that I think that I've noticed with a lot of this culture wars stuff is that there is this strong lack of charity and a focus on how the things are bad. And a lot of it, either side, is just assuming the worst of everything that's going on and sort of building a story around everything going to shit. And that's a woke thing, and that's a fucking not anti-woke thing. And I think most people, where's the optimism? Where's the charity? Where's the best case scenario? And that's what I find really interesting, because that's the problem with online content, right? Hang on, I sat lower, dickhead. It's better. Professional, very professional. But look, what we need to do in terms of this is just for mental health. This is my conclusion. Okay, this is some solutions. Is to start looking at, and I know that some people do this already, but most people don't. Especially in this is something that I've known pre-internet. Okay, I was at uni in 1998 when the internet wasn't very popular, and one of the things that we learned in undergrad, first year undergrad, statistically, was that first of all, the vast majority of people don't understand the political system, which is true. Okay, a small percentage of people engage with political analysis in any meaningful way. Something like, I think it was 3%. I can't remember the actual stat, but it was very small. I'm talking under 3%. I think it was actually under 2% of people actually knew the difference between federal government, state government, and local government, the branches of government. And I think that was actually 10% of people. I can't remember. Don't quote me on the stats. Okay, I can look those up. This is riffing, not. I don't come with stats on this, but when I write, I do. I need to find that study because it still stands today, because it's based on, it's true. But I think it was 10% of people know the difference between the branches of government, but only 2% of people knew that we even had a constitution. And I think it was 1% or 2% of people knew it in detail. Okay, so if I said to you what powers are Section 52 and why is it significant, most people would not know the answer to that question. Okay, it was a landmark case about, okay, so Section 52 in the Constitution is international treaties and affairs, right? And so the way that the Commonwealth get more power than they do is that they use the international treaties and international responsibilities and the fact that they're bound by that as a way of sort of stretching their power over the states. So COVID, that's what happened there, which was there was a battle between federal and state. When there was an international pandemic, there was a debate around who was responsible. That occurs a lot. But people don't know this. Remember when Naomi Wolf was like, under what? Under what authority? And we're like, Section 52 of the Constitution, or Section 51. I think it's Section 51. I'm high. Fucking hell. Now I'm worried I said Section 52 when I... See, even I don't... I've got to look it up, okay? I know the rough outcome. Anyway, I admit that I fucking don't know, all right? I look things up because this is what happened when I was like, I'm studying political science. And then my uncle was like, all right, who was the third Prime Minister? And I was like, that's not really what a degree is. I can look that up. That's details. I don't have to remember that stuff. I'll do that stuff if I'm preparing to write, or I'll check it. But, you got to have it's more about like more complexity than that, and understanding the sort of overarching context of everything. Being charitable, being curious. That's what you learn at university in an arts degree, is not so much rote learning. And this is where I think there's that tradie mindset and vocational mindset versus just learning. Like expecting people to just learn stuff rote is, nonsense. Anyway, that was just a side point because I'm fucking whatever. But I think when we talk about when you understand that statistic, okay, when you understand the fact that most people do not understand this stuff in detail, okay. Most people think that a political science degree means that that you just learn facts and trivia, okay, which is not true. Political scientists try to create models. They try to assess things. They try to predict the future. They try to, they look at the data. They look at voting behavior. It's a lot of stuff. And then I've also done user experience, which looks at user behavior, intent, how to get people changing hearts and minds, same thing. Psychology, same thing. Ultimately, it's all what I do, which is persuasion and changing minds. But again, one thing I'm saying, it's like, I'll get to why I'm optimistic. There's a lot of things, because my last stream, I was very worried about nudging and the ethics in the industry. And what I was also, the main feeling that I had was that I knew that governments were fucking incompetent at this stuff. Okay, a lot of the reason why a lot of these laws pass, these bad digital laws pass, is because they don't know or understand this stuff in detail, and they tend to agree with the histrionics that come from conservatives and stuff. In 2008, Stephen Fielding tried to put up a internet filter. Somebody think of the children, a porn filter, internet filter. We fought that, okay. But over time, they chipped away, and we've effectively got an internet filter, okay, because they do it through regulation. This is how it works. But the reason I'm optimistic is because I'm starting to see, first of all, I think that your level of optimism is largely dependent on what you consume. And also looking at, I was talking about these sort of... my thoughts on the digital culture wars. I'm starting to think that I need to separate the digital culture wars from the sort of material policy ones, because they're very different. They are downwind from each other. Like, they are sort of connected, but they're very different in terms of how they travel. Okay. But you've got to see this stuff largely as entertainment. Okay. And this was something, that's right, I was talking about the stats. So if you see this stuff as entertainment, and understand that most people don't know what they're talking about, and I will tell you now, if you watch Tim Pool, he is wrong on when he explains things. He says things with confidence, but they're not true. He shows that he doesn't understand what things mean. He looks them up on Wikipedia, but this is what I'm talking about with, a humanities degree, is that you've got these building blocks that happen. But Wikipedia is not sufficient. It doesn't replace this, like this new university. I hope they actually have proper foundational learning as part of that. And you'll find that if they're teaching this stuff properly, their students will end up being fucking left-wing, which is fine, but I don't know where their money's coming from, and I don't know whether that's going to be an issue or not. Anyway, separate thing. I wish them well. But so if you look at YouTube, most people don't know, first of all, basic things. There's a culture that of America, like America's great, but like they've got this grifty sort of guru culture. All of the cults and televangelism and all those things tend to come out of America because of that. It's just part of that hustle neoliberal, individual mindset. Okay, if you're more collective in your structures, your collective community, it gives you what you need, and you're less inclined to join cults. Now that's a big generalization, but I'm just saying that sense of community that comes out of churches, or comes out of groups, it comes out of government, it comes out of that collective sense, is sort of opposed to individualism. And individualism, because individualism in the culture is you're on your own, of course you're going to be hurting and looking for the next thing that gives you a sense of belonging. Like that's a human trait, to want to belong. Okay, that's a fact. And so, a lot of this stuff is, I think, sort of the death rattle of this neoliberal mindset, where there is zero evidence to indicate that we're individuals, and it's all this whole social Darwinist nonsense that we're, this libertarian, I'm only me and my family and my lot, and it's like, well, yes, I mean right libertarian, by the way. And they've also abused, the American libertarians have abused the word libertarian. Okay, I'm a classical, libertarian, Marxist, socialist, whatever. That's the traditional term. Okay, so libertarian and anarchism are basically the same thing. Okay, in the classical sense, Americans changed the words. But basically, I think, look, this is why I have a sense of optimism. Okay, which is that the governments are fucking incompetent. Okay, first of all. Most people don't know that governments are incompetent, and they don't know the structures. They don't know how laws are passed. They don't know sort of little things around behaviour or mood or reading sentiment. Like reading sentiment is a big part of what I do. Okay, looking at patterns, looking at behaviour, looking at how looking at what's popular, what's not. That's part of A/B testing. Again, when I say about ethics in the industry, I'm saying there's a good way to use this stuff and a bad way to use this stuff. And what has given me hope is that I was watching Gruen, okay, Australian show called Gruen. You might know them from Joe Rogan. When Joe Rogan shared that video, which was a parody ad that mentioned him, and obviously is a good sport, so it's fine. But Gruen is a show about advertising and talking about that. And now what I saw was Todd Sampson, who happened to be the CEO of a very one of the biggest ad agencies. He's starting to push back on ethics. He's starting to push back on dark patterns. He's actually, mindful and knowledgeable around this stuff. And it gives me a bit of hope, because initially they were sort of very quiet on this stuff. It became sort of a known secret that because we can, we're going to do it, these bad things, for the right reasons. And these bad guys are going to do it, but we're going to ignore that, because if they take that toolkit away from us, then, blah, blah, blah. So there's no real incentive for them to start talking about it, but they are. And that's where I say, look, there's signs of hope there. I'm sitting there going, okay, look, people are being made aware of things. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, their approval rating is in the toilet. And there's conversations, they're going this way, okay? They're going in a direction, and it's unpopular, okay? That's interesting. That there's the lowest approval rating since I think since before the Iraq War, right? Really low approval ratings. They're unpopular, and this is where, when you understand how I know I've talked a lot about this sort of unethical use of cynical use of numbers, but there is something to be said. There's something beautiful about data that is I love data. Data is beautiful in a sense that it gives you information that you can work with. Now, especially for those bad people who go by the numbers. And this is my point. So, the Democrats have a certain policy. They've been in government for X amount of time. I'm seeing a lot of the left being hypercritical of them. I'm seeing them push for sort of Medicare for all those sort of policies. Same thing here. Like, I think that the ALP should be paying attention, which they do, okay, to what's going on overseas in terms of sentiment. But then they get the numbers, okay? They get the polls and they go, this is unpopular. So what you do is you make, eventually the data that they get, that means they have to change course, or they're going to get kicked out, or they're going to lose the election. And that's where some of these things are useful. Like, I don't like it because it's just, it does strip the humanity out of it. You've always got to be mindful of the humanity and what you're doing. Like, going purely by the numbers is actually something that, you still got to be human about it. And that's my criticism of data scientists driving and Martech and all that sort of stuff, is that they're too focused on numbers and not focused on harm. And that's, again, a flip side of it. But there is a good side to things. And there's a way to be charitable. And that's something, I think, a rule of thumb for most people, which is that, if you're seeing, because one thing I do is, because I watch everything, okay, one thing I see is people leaving out parts, and they're only focused on the parts that are making people scared and making people think that it's bad and think things are getting worse. And, and that's on the sort of woke side, where everything is trans murder, everything is fucking outrage over here and fear over here. And, the wokes are coming to kill us all over here. Not true. Neither of them are true. Things are a lot more complicated than that, and people are good. People are generally good. Okay. I've been reading a lot of socialist psychology lately, believe it or not. And a lot of it has been, and it's been memory hold, of course, but it is largely, it's very, very interesting stuff, which is that, a heavy criticism of the DSM-5, which is that the DSM-5 is a fucking weapon of American capitalism, which is true. And a lot of this behavior stuff is within the context of capitalism. How can you know what human nature is if they've got a structure that encourages their worst behaviors? I've said this before, okay? I'm really glad I stumbled on Marxist psychology, because it's fucking great, because I realized that I'm probably in that camp, which is that, you can't ignore the surroundings of people. I apologize, my stutter's worse. But you can't ignore the structures that people are in and then diagnose them with a personality disorder, because, some of the Russian psychologists, which have been memory hold, of course, have, from what can be ascertained, they've done research on kids, for example, or human behavior and how people interact socially and all that sort of stuff. And they haven't seen these things. They haven't seen psychopathy. They haven't seen sociopathy in an environment that's, looking after their needs, looking after them, being all of those things. Anyway, let's move on. But my point is that there's a positive side and the negative side, and all of this stuff is up for debate, and all of this stuff is complicated. It depends. And I just tweeted today. I said, has anybody actually thought about applying for a diversity role and working in that field to prevent this stuff going off the rails? What are we doing? What are we actually doing? Because is this just YouTube for clicks, in action, entertainment? If so, you need to go, okay, this is just entertainment, guilty pleasure. I'm watching news for sport. It's not indicative of the real world. They're leaving stuff out. I'm going to watch this, and this across the political spectrum as much as you can bear, because I can't bear the fucking far right stuff. It's just unpalatable. It is just so egregious. I can't handle it. And I also have a bit of a problem with some of the fucking tanky stuff, because again, they leave stuff out too, and they leave out the fact that I'm not saying it doesn't work necessarily. I'm saying that everyone needs to be on board, and they're not, so we need a plan. And that's where you're never going to have anyone on board. And that's why I wrote a book review about angrynomics. It wasn't really a book review, it was kind of lazy. I should have done better, but I'm tired. But a book called Angrynomics, and addresses some of this stuff, trying to come up with solutions that everyone can back and everyone can get on board with. And it's actually a really interesting book. I got it on audiobook. It was actually worth listening on the audiobook because the structure is very different. So I'll give that a go. But when you're charitable, right, this is where I think the principle of charity, I talk about this all the time, the principle of charity and the principle of humanity have to come back into politics. Or at least online political discourse, which I think is distinct. Okay. So, but the principle of charity is that you take what someone is saying and assume the best possible outcome, read it in the best possible way. Okay. The principle of humanity is that you assume that person has come to their conclusions based on their experiences and based on what they're seeing. Now, a large part of that principle of humanity is me knowing that people are receiving a lot of bullshit news, a lot of extreme news, and a lot of stuff that they're unwittingly, consuming and helping and sharing and radicalizing people. Like you can still criticize that with the principle of humanity because you've got to acknowledge that problem exists. But the principle of charity is to just assume that when someone says something, that they're saying it with assume the best possible intent, like some of those things where TERFs share trans activist stuff when it's obviously a joke. Okay, when you say, but they take it seriously and they present it in the worst possible way, they present it in the worst possible argument, they spin it, and then it comes out and it's like, well, no, I can see how it was just a joke that didn't land. Just whatever, let it go. Okay, you want to be able to joke, let them joke, that kind of thing. Okay. But also when you see things in the best possible light, I'm not saying to be naive, I'm saying always when you see something that has a call to action to it, like something, even especially when you're watching that sort of right-wing YouTube content, okay, something that has a call to action on it. There's a number of tactics that I can talk about at some point, which is, the way that the language is structured and the way that there's ways to tell if it's like a sales pitch that's not a sales pitch, right? Especially with politics. But largely what you should do is assume that they're leaving something out and go look for the information that is the opposite and try to find, the truth behind that. But because I think you'll find how much bullshit is shared on both sides. Anyway, I'm a bit high, so I'm not going to stay long because I'm not, you can tell I'm a little bit like loopy in the faith. So, but here's some good news, okay? This is why I think that we're drawn to bad news, we're drawn to fear, we're drawn to negative emotions. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter particularly, LinkedIn is just fucking. But I'll tell you what I'm doing on LinkedIn in a minute. Because when you understand how the different platforms are and what they do, and how you can market yourself, it's good. It's. I think everything's actually going to be okay. I know it sounds weird because I got a 12-hour suspension today, like the other day. I honestly think that everything's going to be okay, and here's why. So we've got a government who doesn't understand the internet. That's fucking like boomer fucking shit. Okay, you've got Facebook and Twitter. And Twitter, like I had a suspension and I understand why. Okay, it was algorithmic. The reason why you just do your suspension time is because if you appeal it, it takes longer to appeal it. So you may as well just do your suspension. You go, yeah, fair cop. Okay, naughty corner. I'll go away and think about what my main return fuck you tweet is. Right? It was what was I saying? Oh yeah. So Facebook just today. Mentioned that they're cracking down on unethical advertising targeting for things like weight loss, political affiliation. Okay, you can't target people in sexual orientation, political affiliation, all of these things that are, like Facebook actually off their own back. Okay, not because the government asked them to, did this. Now that gives me hope. The problem is that it means that I have to somehow at some point admit that technocracy might work. And that because the fact that Facebook did this off their own backs shows a lot to me, that they're frustrated with government. Okay, they're waiting for Mark's, for all his flaws and all his fucking lame shit, right? I think there's a lot of problems. Okay, there's a lot of problems with like antitrust and that sort of stuff, but we've got to give credit where credit's due. And this is the overall story that I'm talking about, which is that you can focus on the shit and feel like crap and go around thinking that everyone hates you and everything's a problem and, the world is ending. Or you can go, oh, wow, this crazy system. I imagine, principle of charity, I imagine that they were frustrated with government. He said several times, regulate me. Okay, fucking, are you done? Are you going to regulate? No. Okay, well, I'll just do this. The fact that he's like regulating, because he knew that they also, it's not his business. I'm just saying, like, generally speaking, but they knew Facebook, Meta, Meta, knew that that government were never going to regulate that particular thing, because I've told you about it. I've told you had the benefit from it, both sides. They were never going to do it. Facebook were actually off their own backs went and did this, and that's amazing. The fact that you can no longer target ads at people like based on their affiliation is extraordinary. That's something that government would never do. And I'm just saying, like, there's ways to look at things that aren't like doom and gloom, which is you got to give people credit where credit's due and understand that Facebook is like, 35,000 employees? Like, they're all people, they're all working Facebook is the biggest country in the world in terms of its citizens, virtually, right? Like, Facebook is the superpower. We've got a superpower thing going on with Amazon, Google, and Facebook, right? And Apple. But they're making moves. And again, having worked in tech, and this is the problem, is that most people don't trust tech. They don't trust them. And that's the problem, is that we need a new framework other than just, like, I'm questioning socialism as a framework. Yes, it's great. I mean, the thing is, I know that there's all these toolkits, right? But when you're looking at solutions, you've got to get away from ideology when you're talking about solutions, okay? You've got to take all of those ideas and put them together and come up with a fucking solution. And so for me having to admit that maybe in this instance, technocracy, in certain instances where there's too much self-interest in politics to actually, regulate in a certain area, that I trust you put pressure on the tech companies, which seems like it was pressure from within, which is fantastic. Like, one thing you know about Facebook is that, yes, they might be closed shop, but internally they're pretty open. Like, their Slack, everyone's accessible, right? That's a tech company thing. But, credit where due. Like, this is something that I thought I would have to fight really hard for, and now I think, oh, shit, can I do this again? Can I go back to tech now? Because I go, oh, well, that means I can run ads again, because I'm not competing with unethical people who are targeting people in the wrong way. And you start to go, oh, are Facebook actually trying to do the right thing? Google, are they trying to do the right thing? And this is where I started, there's a charitable way to look at things, which is, especially with COVID, especially with a lot of this stuff, and also when you understand that politics is probably separate from digital politics, okay? So pointless. But, most people who are on Twitter arguing about politics aren't actively involved in politics. They're just talking out their asses, okay? But then you've got political systems here. Hang on, there's only not many people watching. It's that time of day. That's all right. But so this is what was I saying? I got distracted. Let me think. Taya's distracted again. Oh yeah, so looking at like digital and politics are separate things, and political debate, they seem to relate to each other, but I see a lot of people talking and not a lot of doing. Okay, this is something that I've always said with the internet. Is that the internet is fucking not real life, and it's downwind from real life, but it's not like really real life, because most people just are sitting there on the toilet. They're toilet tweeting or fucking sitting on their couch talking shit and not actually doing anything, myself included. Okay. We could all be more active. Now, I'm deliberately not active at the moment, mostly because I want my party to win and I don't want any turf shit to fucking, start. And if I do anything, then if I make any, I'm trying to just hope that this passes and goes away and they win. You know, like, that's why I'm not getting involved. But I will afterwards. But the reason to be optimistic is because, you know, the tech companies, I was sitting there, I was watching Gruen, they're all talking about ethics. I'm going, whoa, they stole my gig. I've got to expose this stuff. And then you got Meta saying that they're going to get rid of some of these unethical things that were being used to launder the money. The thing that I was talking about yesterday, they're going to sort of, you know, clamp down on this. Now, whether or not they do is another question, but we watch them. But the government are never going to regulate that stuff, and there's a positive spin to be had. Now, this is what I'm actually getting at. So it's the same with this Build Back Better and Agenda 2030 and all that sort of stuff. What if a lot of this arguing, now this is, if I had more than $8 in the bank and I was rich and famous and benevolent, and if I was in a billionaire position, okay, Jeff Bezos accepted because he's clearly a fucking psychopath. You're not Jeff Bezos. Let's say you are, no, not Bill Gates. Who's a good Bill? Okay, let's say, let's say you're Jack. I think let's go with tech, because the tech guys are generally a little more driven by certain values. Okay, they're not generally psychopaths. Okay, they're easily led guys who believe in capital. They're technocrats, right? And you know that sort of anarcho-capitalist stuff. They have that optimism. So honestly, most of the theory of anarcho-capitalists, okay, is basically Marxism. Marx is syndicalist, fucking anarchist, right? That's the same fucking thing. They just don't say that. Anyway, so they do tend to lean in that direction. Now, what if this stuff was not intended to suppress people, but intended to benevolently give crazy people a chew toy? Like the internet is like Twitter and those things and those debates is like, acts like a chew toy for crazy people who don't do anything. What if it was just nothing? What if we went back to ignoring the internet like before that? What if we ignored it? What if, again, I'm not saying ignore the like immediate harm stuff, because there's mechanisms in place for that. What if journalists collectively turned around and said, look, I'm going to talk about the internet. I'm going to get in internet fights, but it's not real life. We have to have a rule that the internet is something different. An internet, the comment section has a separate status. The problem, I think, with the internet that happened was that we thought that comments mattered. We thought that, you know, like I don't have comments on my blog. I'm actually making it so that only paid members can comment. And that's how it should have been. What the interface does, from a UX point of view with Twitter, what the interface does is it creates false equivalency between a fucking idiot and a smart person. Psychologically speaking, they're equal, okay? That blue check doesn't matter because there's dim midwits on that too, right? We need some way of sort of, Reddit does it better with the you know, stickers and karma and like labels and all that sort of stuff. Like Reddit's much better, okay, at managing that. But what if Twitter were to have something more like, you know, you've got a degree, for example, in this thing, you have a degree. What if Twitter were to sort of expand your profile with badges or something like that make it a bit more authoritative? Because people create this equivalence between things where idiots have the same fucking space as normal people. We need to just stop ignoring the internet. But what I'm seeing downwind from that is the adults taking over. Thankfully, about fucking time. Thank you. Okay, which was talking about ethics and dark patterns and that sort of stuff. And one of the things that one of the panelists said on Gruen was that some of these things should be made illegal. And that's amazing to hear from somebody who was a CEO of Leo Burnett, which is one of the biggest advertising agencies in the country. And the fact that he is saying that certain things should be illegal means that that's coming, which is fantastic, because I've been pushing for this stuff for ages and no one's listened. And I won't get the credit because someone else fucking said it now. Welcome to my world. And so I was watching and I'm like, why can't I be on Gruen? I want to be on Gruen. Because I'm a fuckwit. Anyway, so, because I tend to just burn bridges, that's why. Anyway, but so I'm feeling positive about some stuff, okay? And this is what I don't know what I was saying, but what was I going to say? Oh yeah. So rather than maybe the way forward is to go back to the internet not mattering. So email, not a contract, okay? Unless it's digitally signed and, vetted and all that stuff. Email, words in an email, not a contract. You got to fucking have a proper signature, all right? Twitter, not newsworthy. I'm amazed. As somebody who went viral early on, trolling journalists, the fact that that's gone for 10 fucking years and nobody's gone, hey, you shouldn't do that. I did it to show them that this was fucking easy to hack, and they went, oh yeah, that's easy to fucking make stories. I was like, oh my God. But there's things that can be done, but also this is my frustration with this whole left versus right paradigm, which is that everyone agrees largely with each other. Well, they're cherry picking stuff that doesn't. There's really bad faith on both sides where they just deliberately leave out the good stuff and deliberately make people feel, because the nature of the beast is that nobody wants to talk about positivity. Nobody wants to talk about the good things that are going on. I mean, my newsletter I'm going to have a section which is here's some good fucking news with my analysis, which is these things, which is, people are writing amazing books. Like Angrynomics is amazing. It's got solutions. It's got economic solutions. Facebook are making positive changes. Twitter's making positive changes. They're doing a lot of things that people aren't necessarily paying attention to because they're too busy arguing about fucking bullshit. Too busy. But what if you actually set up shop as a diversity consultant and said, look, I think I'm deliberately going into this field because I want to change it from within, because I think that I've got a better way to do this. Why not do that? Okay. Now I know that I'm having to, be flexible. Yes, I've talked about the socialist stuff because I'm trying to get people to sort of think clearly, but I do tend to be more in that sort of social democrat, reformist kind of thing, because I don't think that this. I don't know. I understand. Look, my faith in government is not high at the moment. My faith in the institution is high. My faith in the people in there to actually do it is not so high at the moment. Okay. That said, I also think that maybe we're rearranging what our institutions are and that tech play a role in that. And that maybe Facebook, there is an argument to be had about them just doing it in spite of the government. There's an argument there because it seems like they're doing good things. It seems like they're trying to solve the problem, and that's a good thing because they have the data, and data-driven problem solving is good. Data-driven radicalization, bad. There's always a flip side. This is a complex problem. So, but for me, it's well, if someone is sort of making you feel like everything is bad and everything is ending, and they're talking in an angry way, and I've been watching some of the people that I watch. Okay, I've watched, and again, I'm not making any claims. These are just what I've observed. Okay, there's no conclusions here. I just think that everyone is susceptible to this problem. Anyone on YouTube, anyway, anyone. I'm not, because no one fucking watches me. But everyone is susceptible to this problem, which is talking about the issue, attracting an audience, and then being radicalized by their audience, and also sort of seeing that this is popular and doubling down without realizing sort of who they're helping. Okay, this is a problem that influencers need to sort of address. I know this is probably not coming out well. I'm a little bit so I haven't quite acclimated myself to the lyrica, so I'm a little woozy. I apologize. What was I going to say? Yeah, but I've seen Tim Pool's a classic example of that. Okay, he's saying things that just aren't true. He's hyping things up. He's using the Daily Mail as his sources, who are, they're not reliable sources. Okay, Murdoch Press is trash. Sorry, but it is. If you're using Murdoch Press as anything, it's trash. Okay, I'm sorry, it just is. He's got an agenda there, and he's currently at war with the Australian government and with Facebook, and he's going to be going for that. He also owns both woke and non-woke media, and fucking stokes the flames of the culture wars in both sides, so that they get more traffic. So fucking don't trust this stuff. Consider it entertainment, okay? And even the so-called sort of independent journalists, okay? I'm biased. We're all biased. I've got biases, okay? I will not engage with the right because I find them unpalatable. I understand their worldview, but I don't agree with it. I think most of the data, most of history does not align with the conservatives being the good guys. It aligns with them being the bullies and the bad guys in history. And, that's something that I'm not going to enable someone who wants to kill me in the end, okay? That's what history tells us, is that largely socialists and Marxists and anyone who they deem, left of centre eventually ends up persecuted when this progresses into like, if it progresses, we end up dead. And that's what happens, or starving or whatever. Okay. So of course anyone who knows history will be healthily suspicious of conservatives and stuff. But what was I going to say? Trying to put a positive spin on things, looking at the positive side of things. It's not that bad. And also, what if there's a benevolence to this stuff? What if this fact-checking stuff, it doesn't work perfectly, but what if it is? What if it's working? What if, like New South Wales have gotten was it 95% vax rate? Okay, was it New South Wales? Don't know. One of the Australian states got 90%. We're heading for 90% soon. Okay, that's our goal. And it works. So the semantics about, this is where I'm conflicted, because all of this libertarian stuff and all of this like neoliberal conservative stuff, it's pretty well proven not to work, not to be effective. And sometimes, again, I'm not saying that there's obviously flip sides to that, but it works. And so this is where we need to do slightly different types of government. We need to make sure that we have governments that are looking after their people. I recommend Angrynomics. He talks about capitalism 4.0, which uses, I'm not an economist. This is where I sort of go, I don't understand. But I passed macroeconomics with like 55%, like barely. Okay. So don't listen to me. However, I should get an economist on the podcast. I should actually ask them. Maybe they'll want an interview. A comically large milk bottle. But I was thinking that because the new podcast Cleavage is out, and I'm going to have people on. I might actually ask them if they'll come on and talk once I've got a couple of episodes. That'd be cool. Talk about it because they talk about national. Was it? Like things, a data dividend, so paying people for their data, for example, that so that there's you end up it's a data dividend. You're a shareholder of the company, so if they do any shit, they're accountable to shareholders, and they also lease your data from you because they took it. And I've been an advocate for the data dividend for a long time, and I talk about it. I haven't really talked about it much, to be honest, but I agree with that, which is that rather than making it a public company, or sorry, not a public company, government owned, but rather than making it public, you make the people who are on it shareholders of the company. So users become shareholders, which I think is a fantastic idea. GameStop is an interesting case study in that, where your customers and your users are your shareholders. Now that's extraordinarily exciting as an idea, but also where I think they talk about negative interest. So you get paid to take out a loan, so long as it's for a business or something that will, raise more capital, you can have a negative interest loan. That's been proven to work as well. So again, it's just reimagining things. And when you look at history, you see that history's gone through this. I'm currently reading Bill Bryson's Made in America. Okay. And because I want to learn more about America before I go on Walk-ins Welcome. And I want, because Bridget said something to me about that, America is quite diverse. And I think we forget that America is incredibly diverse. Okay. But one thing that's interesting in that book so far, there's lots, but one thing that's interesting is that diversity has been built into the American way since the beginning. We talk about Puritanism. Yes, that's true. But also it was formed by separatists and then invaded by Puritans and taken over because they tend to be dominant. Okay, they came later, but then they became dominant. But throughout American history, okay, that, again, we got to remember there's 50 colonies. We've only got 6, and we have had some fraught stuff with the Federation. Okay, we borrowed the Federation idea from the United States and 2 houses of elected parliament. But what was I going to say? Oh yeah, but in America, when they settled, it was basically like they tried. The reason why American language has changed so much, and I'm sure if you've read this book on, whatever, but the reason why American language changed so much was because they were trying to find common language with the indigenous people and people who were coming, because people were coming from all sorts of places. So what they did was they started to build compound words and different words and all that sort of stuff. And this is why it's very interesting to see that it is in the DNA. You know how I joke about them being obsessed with words? It's true, like it's in their DNA, but the intention was always to be inclusive. So, they took Spanish words, they took sort of indigenous, Native American words, and it was it made me laugh that Christopher Columbus, the reason why they're called Indians was because he thought that they were in India. That man failed upwards. That's what's really fascinating about this book, is how fucking countries fall by people being incompetent. Get formed by incompetence. He thought he was in India, and then I think he didn't settle this. I think he thought that he thought that I can't remember the book now, but he failed upwards anyway. And it was like, basically he threatened to kill anyone who disagreed with him and all this sort of stuff. It's like the same stuff. Okay. And sorry, I can't remember the details. I'm fucking off my nut. But what's really interesting is that that inclusion. They've always had that sort of make everyone feel welcome as part of it. Like that was something that it hit me in the guts, it hit me in the heart, where I went, you know what, Americans, they fucking mean well. And like, I think we need to, again, when you say, I think everything's going to be okay, America's figuring some stuff out. They're figuring some stuff out. They fight about it a lot. They're very loud, but you know what? Like all of this stuff, yes, you can look at it as, imperialism, but when you look at the dynamics between America and Britain, which is that, they've been trying to differentiate themselves from Europe, from the Commonwealth since the beginning. And so when you see that, things like that the Britain has owned roughly, I think it was 70% of the world at any given point. They used to own 7, and the Americans come in and start defending those places against the UK, and it's very interesting stuff. And again, this stuff I know, but it was a reminder that the Americans, they mean well. Okay, they mean well, and as much as we make fun of them, I think the reason why we love America so much, even though it's like this massive imperialist bully, okay, let's not ignore that. But again, when you sort of doom scrolling and reading anti-imperialist left stuff, and you're assuming the worst possible intention of everything, you see that. But what you also could see is they're actually anti-imperialists. They perceive themselves as against the fucking UK. Okay. The UK have always made fun of them with their new languages and looked down on their attempts to be inclusive in their language and all of that sort of changing stuff as changing dialects. They look down on us, and Australians can relate to that. Okay, we can relate to that shit, which is the English are fucking snobs, and Americans are pretty uptight about the difference. I think between Australians and Americans is that Americans make the effort. Americans have manners, And they sort of care about making everyone feel welcome, which I find, again, this is just a general thing. It's gone off the rails, and there's a bunch of fucking Puritan fuckwits that obviously are fucking that up. But this is, again, through history. It's the history that you focus on that matters. It's the story that you focus on that determines your mood. It is, you know, if you're always taking in negative content, always taking in, on either side, taking in stuff that's bad for you, or telling you that the world's ending, or, you know, and then you watching murder porn and watching YouTube. I think, like, YouTubers, political YouTubers, myself included, okay, you know, you should keep it as a hefty grain of salt. You should keep it in the same thing as, like, murder documentaries. You know, we're drawn to that stuff. We're drawn to horror movies. We're drawn to all those things. And so you need to park that political commentary in the same box as, you know, anything else, and actually, you know, focus on data, focus on evidence, focus on what's true. Read books. And even if you don't read, okay, because I know a lot of people who aren't readers. You know, my husband isn't a reader, but he will listen to audiobooks, okay? He finds me interesting in many ways and smart, and he loves my smartness, but he finds what I do dull as fuck, okay? He's not interested in this, but he loves me, so it's okay. He likes that I'm insane. But it's my insanity is structural. It's not me. I'm kidding. No, but ADHD is an interesting one, actually, when you think about it, because ADHD is an illness that largely exists because of structural fucking stuff. If I was out in wherever, I wouldn't have it. If I wasn't having to function and having to show up to work and having to get admin done, I wouldn't have to take the things that I take, and it wouldn't be a problem. I'd just be off and pursuing what I want to pursue, and then dropping that project and moving to another project. And, you know, if I didn't have to make a living and all my basic needs were met, me being a fucking flake would not be an issue, right? And that's why, you know, I like that socialist psychology, not social psychology, but it does feed into social psychology. That would be better for everybody if, you know, we weren't living in these structures. And to make a you know, yes, I'm not saying ADHD is not real. I'm not saying I don't need medication. I need medication to operate in this framework. That's a fact. That's within this paradigm. I have ADHD. Okay, to ignore that. It's the same thing with, you know, it's like, yeah, I think we can get away from talking about ideal worlds. Okay, yes, we're all fighting for our ideal world. Okay, but what we can do is also try to find solutions where everyone's kept happy. And I think that that's something that America does very out in the open. And this is, again, that positive spin, okay, which is that they have the mechanisms. And this is where the polling stuff will self-correct. I have a feeling this will self-correct, which is that Biden and Harris are incredibly unpopular, okay? That's gonna trigger something else. They're going to maybe have to go further left, because the left won't accept it. Oh yeah, I've got the mark on here because I was doing something, and then I was fucking around with something. I was going to do a piece about how all of this, I was going to try and just, like, I can't do this stuff, make up for shit, but I was going to try and make a point that a lot of this is art, a lot of this is performance, a lot of it is manufactured. And to actually, for me to be real, you know, is not sellable. It is not possible, okay? I need, you know, you need tens of thousands of dollars in gear. You need multiple people. You need makeup. You need all of that stuff. You need lights. You need to do research. You know, simple. To be good. Most of them don't research. Most of them just read headlines. I know what's involved in this stuff. I know how, you know, you see how many people work for Tim Pool and he still doesn't read shit because he's too busy moving on to the next thing and reading the headlines of things, and not actually, he doesn't have that grounding in a degree, and that shows. Oh, that's what I was saying, which is that degrees have a foundational building blocks where there's, like, you know, first you start with Marx, first you start with all the basics, and the same thing with psychology. You start with your basics. You start with Freud, you start with behaviorism, I'm doing biopsychology at the moment. Actually, I withdrew because I was too tired. I'm going to do it next round. But I was doing biopsychology, okay? I was reading it all, and I got up to, like, halfway through, and I went, fuck it, I'm too tired. You know, because the vaccine has caused a sort of flare in both of us, I think. So we're just laying low for a little while. Anyway, I'm on intermission, but I've got the textbook and I still read stuff. I still take it in. But, you know, in the same thing, you do your sort of biological psychology, you do all this foundational stuff, you do your social psychology, you do, you know, your Stanford prison experiment, all of that stuff. But then you build on it. So it builds. So the reason why this sort of woke stuff has taken hold is because what the American market has done is sort of decoupled this deconstructionist postmodernist version of postmodernism and splintered it off into its own degree versus a political science degree where you would actually go, you know what, this is it builds up to policy work. It builds up to solutions. It builds up to application at sort of third year and beyond in postgrad. Now, that's the problem, is that most of these degrees now have no application. I'm lucky that I got a degree that has some application in policy, okay, and various other things. But, you know, I think this is what has actually happened, is that people don't understand. Still, they go through university still not understanding the basic structures of how government works and what happens and what the role of democracy is. They'll sit around talking about some narrow fucking thing, all right, making claims, okay, that these experiments have been debunked. You don't debunk anything necessarily. What you do is it builds a picture and you go, okay, well, these things are true in this situation. This was true in that situation. This was the problem with that. You don't just replace things, okay? That's not how this works in anything. And this is why, you know, I prefer to sort of, I've said this before with your Boolean, you know, it's and, not or. You know, there's no or, there's and. And so, you know, Marxism is true and, okay, capitalism is true and in certain cases capitalism works. In some situations, a socialist analysis works. In other, you know, libertarian, they're all in conflict with each other, and that's where pluralism fits. And people don't understand how these ideologies fit under a general pluralism. And pluralism and democracy and that democratic process is about synthesizing all of these ideas into solutions, okay? And that's where, with Australia, it's like, well, the answer is in, you know, the result. The result is all you need, okay? Yes, we can have a conversation, but we have our conversation. This is another thing I think that people don't get about Australia, is that Americans will look at our laws and go, oh my God. It's like, well, like with abortion, I was talking about abortion law, and it was largely decriminalized like for years and years and years. Everyone could pretty much access that stuff. We just don't get around to the admin. So it's written in law, but it's not really applied. And because we don't have a militarized police force at the moment, New South Wales is... Again, states, New South Wales is heading maybe in that direction. I hope they roll it back. But they usually do. Like, we live a fairly placid life, and we so placid that we forget to get around to admin. And then someone suddenly goes, oh yeah, we should probably pass a law. And everyone goes, all right. And then the fucking conservatives come out and go, no, we hate that shit. But usually it passes and we move on. We've got voluntary euthanasia here, okay, which is fantastic. Do you know how relieved I am with, when you live with chronic illness, how relieved I am to know that I can decide when I go if things get bad. There's such a weight off, because I've watched some people die of like cancer, and it's just horrific. I don't want that for me, and I don't want it for anyone else. And I have said, Paul and I have an understanding that if my brain goes or something happens, and you can kill me when it stops being funny. Keep me alive for as long as it's not funny. Like if I'm just forgetting things and it's funny and I do stupid shit, film that, okay? And a little bit. But if I'm like if I'm coming out with my shit in my hand, yeah, it's pretty funny. But if I'm doing stuff that's actually sad and distressing, fucking that's the time. But we have that here. But again, this is where I think looking at individual ideologies and going, that's my cult, is incredibly dangerous, because it's not the role ideology should play in democracy, for a start. That makes you a stakeholder in one area, and we go, thank you, that's nice. That's why the gender critical strategy is silly, because it's never going to happen. Because, you know, a lot of people, we have to find a solution. And I think that government policy people are actually just trying to come up with compromises and solutions, and they're doing pretty well, okay? I want to know if there's been any, because the Victorian law passed. See, the thing about these laws is that now we have enough of them passed to have some meaningful data. So I want to know what's happening in Victorian prisons. I want to know what's happening in gender clinics, and I want to know whether this is actually a good law or not. You only test a law by having it and then gathering some data. Is there data? There's enough time now to see the data. Are you full of shit or not? Are you scaremongering, fear-mongering people? Is the law working? That's a good thing. Is the policy working? Just because it's not the policy that's pure enough for you doesn't mean the policy doesn't work. And that's sort of the problem, is that this ideological purity is on the internet. And that's why I'm calling the podcast cleavage, as much as because I've mentioned it a few times. It's a fucking perfect word. But I want to focus on those cleavages that are never going to be resolved, and they're not useful in a democracy because you're going to have to compromise. Consensus is everything. And that's where I feel more positive, because what I'm seeing is democracy working. I'm seeing the institution, that beautiful fucking thing, those systems of, the Washington, the American system, okay, which again I know is a federation with multiple different systems and lots of colonies, and there's a lot of history there. They're not necessarily, again, Americans are good at naming things what they're not, which is the United States of America. And it's like, they're colonies. They should have been called the United Colonies of America. That was the Bill Bryson thing refreshed my memory on the history of America, and I pulled my head in a bit, because I've been making generalizations about it, which is funny. But we love you, America. We do. We love you because you fucking mean well. I think that again, this is one of those things with the internet where it's like you mean well. Everyone means well, but there's a side effect to meaning well, and we've got to address the side effect and not focus so much on meaning well. Like this imperialism, I'm sure American imperialism started with meaning well, okay, rescuing colonies from bad people and all that stuff, because the UK wasn't doing anything, and then you got a lot of money and you thought that I can see historically how this occurred, and it lost its way because the narrative of meaning well sort of doesn't really work when you start bombing children. Okay, we can address that stuff, but everyone thinks they're doing the right thing mostly. Okay, very few people actually go out of their way to do evil, bad things. That's just not how we are. Most people think so. Maybe what you should do is assume that most people think they're doing the right thing, and figure out how you can persuade them that maybe there's unintended consequences they haven't thought of, or there's a flip side. And that's where watching both things helps. And that's where when someone's saying bullshit, you go, or you have that feeling in your tummy, again, that sort of needle nudging. If you have that feeling in your tummy that you're not getting the full truth, go look for it. Okay? Cynical theories, as much as I don't want to start a shit with James Lindsay, because he will start shit if it's convenient for him. Well, it won't be for him, because the reason why it won't be for him is because I can bring it, and I know that I can poke holes in his shit. He's left stuff out. He deliberately ignored stuff, okay, to create some narrative that this is like the commies taking over, which is something that has been stolen from the 60s, and it's been going on for 100 years. These things aren't new. There's just new faces to the same panic around communism. This is anti-communist propaganda, okay, and it's the same shit, and people keep falling for it. That the cultural Marxists are coming and they're going to fucking, they said that in the 60s. Still hasn't happened, has it? America has gone further right. That's the ratchet effect, okay? Look that up. They're pulled to the right. Everyone is pulled right, and I'm trying to pull left, and I'm the only, and there's only a handful of people that can do it. And so that's why I'm going to have meaningful conversations with as many people as I can and say, hey, are you sure that this is what side you want to be on? Because historically, and based on the data and based on the trends, this ends badly. When you leave the left, are you truly left-wing? When you say you are you truly left-wing? What do you mean by that? What does that mean to you? Because if it doesn't mean, again, it's like at a policy level, I don't know how anyone could be people have, again, the Liberal Party in Australia approached me so many times. Now, in Australia, the Liberal means the Conservatives, and they're still fucking further left than the Democrats, okay, generally, in terms of policy. We've still got some relics of social democracy for now. But the Liberal Party have approached me several times. They want me to run. They think, oh, yeah, you're a great candidate. We need women. We need someone like you on our side. And they go, oh yeah, but we have all sorts of diversity of thought in the party. Yeah, but you also support the things that are just intractable for me. I couldn't be a part of, which is fundamental stuff. Defunding Medicare, defunding universities, privatization, economic rationalism, against the welfare state. Right? They tinker at the edges of it, but they don't believe in like giving people a safety net. All of this stuff. And it's like, no, well, these things are just deep in my fucking heart that you should be looking after people and making sure that people have their basic needs met. We're never going to agree on that because you believe in, like, again, that rational choice theory. You believe in individualism. You're an individualist and I'm not. I don't believe in that. And what you're saying and what you're doing is increasingly not backed by any evidence, okay? Literally. This neoliberalism is a failed experiment. They are wrong and they're doubling down and they're trying hard. But I think a lot of the world is going, no, this Keynesian fucking economics, yes, it has its flaws. We now know how to manage inflation. This is Angrynomics, okay? How the book Angrynomics. But we now know how to fix this inflation problem. Keynes was wrong on this thing. This is like a 2.0 Keynesian economics. There's a lot of Keynesian economists that have sort of addressed it and made it better and refined it over time. It is now proven to work. It is now a fact that this is what works, which is during a recession, governments should spend money, not fucking make cuts. This is now backed in all data, all evidence, all of the outcomes in policy. And so what we're seeing is the death rattle, basically, of a lot of these sort of austerity. We're seeing the death rattle of fucking, Reaganomics. We're seeing the death rattle of Howard in Australia. And so why would I join the party that is against fucking, that's, okay, if you're you might be pro-science, but you're definitely anti-evidence because all of the evidence indicates that Keynesian economics, which I can talk a little bit about, but not really in detail. I've read enough and I just glaze over. Once it gets to a certain point, it's like, yes, I know the basics. I've done economics, I've done micro and macroeconomics. I barely passed it. I know the basics, but I know my Marx, and I know Keynes where he fits in terms of history, but I'm not really, once you get into the theory, I go, nah. I trust the economists and all of the political scientists to go, yep, that works. It's not my bag. You can't know everything, but I also know when to stop talking. Apparently. How long? An hour in? Anyway, apparently I know when to stop talking. Anyway, but for every bit of thing, every piece of content that you see on YouTube, there's an alternate view and there's facts that are missing. And I think this is the frustration that I've got with most of this stuff. And it's what I'm coming, I don't know where this channel fits. Honestly, it's just streaming at the moment. But a lot of my stuff is going back to where I started, which is talking about ethics, talking about dark patterns, talking about this stuff. But I am participating. I'm just using YouTube as basically a way to talk and reach out to people in a casual way, riff on ideas, especially when I'm high, which is fantastic. I'm sure this will reflect really well on my brand. But I'm legally high and I'm in pain. And I had a dose increase and I didn't expect to be loopy and I scheduled the stream. Forgive me. I can actually feel my toes a little bit when I'm on this stuff. And my hands, because I've got peripheral neuropathy and we don't know why. So it's just, I'm trying different treatments. Anyway, so what was I going to say? Oh yeah, so for every bit of sort of doom content, stop looking for doom content all the time. Stop looking for content that only affirms your worldview. Look at something that challenges you, and I think you'll find that there's a lot left out. And so what I'm going to try and do with the newsletter, I've been thinking about it. I know that I've said it's coming for a while. I'm just trying to think about how to do it, and also the integrations, because I want it to be everywhere. I want it to be on Substack and review on Twitter and on my website so that people can access it. But then it just, the integrations, I think I'm overthinking it. I think I need to just do it. What was I going to say? part of my newsletter will be sort of synthesizing some of this stuff and spinning it into, first of all, validating that it's not you. So some of the strategies that are used, tactics that are used to manipulate you, exploring some of that, but also, you know, a positive spin on something that might be misrepresented in the news. So trying to say, you know what, there's actually more information here. Here's what the data says. Here's what theory says. Here's what history says. It says it's not that bad. It's not that bad. This is, I think we're just going through what they went through in the 18th century. Okay. Like I've said, going through this stuff again, trying to determine our norms. Now, America is trying to be inclusive because that's what they did in history. A lot of their words come from them building compound words so that they could communicate and be friends and work together with, you know, again, there's a lot of death there. I'm not discounting that, but I'm saying that, you know, there was there's a positive side to a lot of this stuff, which is that they tried really hard to be inclusive from day one. Okay. It was interesting actually that they landed at America, settled in America, and then they met a tribe, but he spoke English. And so they could communicate because this guy could speak English, and that, I can't remember the details, but, you know, it's just really interesting to read, you know, get into history because it's really cool. And when you have the facts and you are charitable, I think you'd be surprised how much you have in common with everybody and how much people actually mean well and how people are good. I think reading widely, especially history and nonfiction, and especially books like that. I like books. This is what I mean, I'd love to do this. This is what I'm doing with this like book, the little book that I'm going to try and write, which is people who try to make history interesting and funny, like the funny stories, like how funny humans are. You know, like, because a lot of this stuff focuses on, you know, how horrible we can be, but maybe we also need to focus on how resilient we are and how eventually things correct and how we, you know, come together. We have moments where things get really bad and we tend to focus on that. But I think that focusing on things like, you know, Facebook are trying their best. These things are hard. You know, the data, you know, there's not a lot of research on the harm that's happening. People like me are at the forefront of that shit. Okay. It's not, I'm 5 years ahead of everyone else. I'm always happy when people start talking about things that I've been yelling about for 10 years. Even if I get no fucking, I always end up poor because someone else has fucking had my idea. But what it does is it advertises. It's a, you know, it gets people thinking about it, and maybe they might come to me. So if I start writing, if I have stuff, then they'll start, you know, exploring more with me. But, you know, I want to, with my members only stuff, I'd like to just be, you know, teaching people how this stuff works, running courses for marketers on how to, because my advice, I was actually talking last night to Paul while we were watching this, and I said the best thing that can happen is that agencies cynically use the numbers again, but they also do it ethically. So, you know, they have a cynical, detached approach to the culture wars. So, like that insurance company thing, you can't tell me, what was the name of it? John Lewis? Is that the name? Yeah. So, but where everyone got, you know, created a stink about the ad and all that stuff, right? But what you could do, you can't tell me that an insurance company that wouldn't have gotten through legal. I've worked with these things. The agency knew what they were doing. They were KFCing your asses, and you fucking fell for it. And it's really funny because I don't think that, because John Lewis was like, their letter was full of shade. It was so funny. And, you know, it was just like, let it go, but also understand how these things work, right? Which is that would have not gone through legal. If they legal would have gone, no, you can't offer something that, unless there was a strategy involved and they made their case. Okay, that's what would have happened. They would have had, they've done the KFC thing and gone through legal and gone, won't we risk? You can't tell me an insurance company that's all about risk would accidentally advertise something that offers a service they don't offer. They had the letter ready. They knew that people would be mad about that kid in drag. They knew that they would be mad. Okay. So what they did was they had it all pre-prepared. They knew what would happen. They anticipated what the reaction would be, and you all fucking fell for it. You got KFC'd, and it's brilliant. I love that shit. But what I would hope is that people will know how it works. Okay. But that's the one thing that I would hope advertising agencies would start to do, is to cynically do it ethically. if you know what I mean. So detach themselves, look at the numbers, look at the behavior. This is the one thing where I go, the data-driven marketing can have benefit so long as you know as long as we set boundaries there and go, all right, well, we know that the mob's going to be there. How can we exploit this for, without doing harm? So if it's not in a political sense or anything like that, but if it's that fucking thing, then use that. It's great. The mob's there. Use them, right? It's there to be used. They're not going away. And I think that that's really the adjustment that we need to make, is that the mob isn't going away. What we can do is make sure people are looked after. We can make sure that people have, access to mental health care, monitor people, make sure that, not monitor, that I meant monitor our friends, like monitoring as in, making sure that they're looked after and that sort of stuff. Check in with our friends, make sure they're not being radicalized, all of that sort of stuff. Address these unethical funnel things and just detach and go, yeah, let's have a bit of fun. That mob's going to be mad. Let's piss them off. Let's just do that. Let's have fun again. I think that's where we will come to an understanding that the mob always exists. And the people that are always talking about the mob will become dull. So those people, I don't know if trigonometry and Dave Rubin and those things will last very long. Okay. I think people are moving on from that content. And those people are getting radicalized, which is whatever. But eventually, I think that the conversation about cancel culture gets dull. I think people get sick of it. They go, yeah, it's a thing. It's going to happen. Who's cancelled today? I was talking to my doctor, and he's having issues, okay? He's having issues with the medical board over admin. It's pretty excruciating, but he's also been the target of a bit of a nutter, right? And the nutter who's making his life hard on the medical board, which is whatever, okay? By the by, I don't know the facts of the case. I'm just giving you context. But he's an interesting litmus test because he reads The Australian and he's got a perception that, and I went to see him and he goes, what was it? Why is Terry, what's his name? From Monty Python, Terry, fucking hell, my brain's not working. Why has he been cancelled? Because he knows what I do. And so everyone's just sick of it. They're just like, yeah, whatever, And again, people need to know that this is bleaching into things like medical boards and the psych board, and that's going to happen. But what we're going to do is put policies in place that prevent that. So when there's a vexatious claim, you can actually assess that as vexatious. Okay, you're going to understand once we set a framework and an understanding and some sort of triage system, I guess, for lack of a better word, for this new phenomenon. You've got to integrate. This is part of digital transformation, ironically. Okay, it's part of adapting, which is that you make sure you've got policies in place so that if some blue-haired fuck comes in and dobs on you, you've got processes in place to assess the situation and fairly and make sure that it's actually, because it's a loophole at the moment, okay, which is that anyone can complain. Maybe you could go, well, internet complaints go in the special filing cabinet. Bin. Fuck it. If you've got an actual complaint, you can, pick up you actually have to do something. And I think that that's one approach. Okay. The other approach is to just go, well, that's the profession. Because, even I see, what was it? This is why I think that the gender critical side stuff bullshit is somewhat a mirror of the trans rights activists, because they use the same tactics in the sense that, they kept asking me to sign a petition that was in Ireland, I think it was at the time. It was a local political petition, and I refused, and I got shit for it, like I always do, because I said, no, I'm not going to be, because you don't pull people from international to sign a petition that doesn't, no, that's not how it works. I'm not doing it. And so, but then they send this sort of all the UK mob over here to sign the Victorian stuff, and it's like, well, that's not what it was intended to be. And I think that what we need is something where it's like, no, it needs to be an actual constituent. They need to be in your electorate. They need to be, all of these things. If that petition to be valid, a bunch of online signatures, you can just astroturf that stuff. Same thing with bots. We need to ignore the comments. You can't do that. Okay. Anonymous complaints. No, there's a process, and it's like, use the process. I still haven't talked about my FOI with the ABC on the vulva owners thing, which I found interesting, which was that, I can see where their blind spot is, which is that they're relying on online surveys. And that online surveys are not data. And that's where the gaps in the data are. So I think that what it is that we've just, knowing, working in tech, working with clients, working in advertising and working with clients, there's a blind spot. Okay. And what I think would happen is that if there's more cynical use of data, more detachment from that stuff, looking to play with it and, like KFC, that stuff, like that, was it John Lewis? The insurance company ad. But, being smart about stuff like they were, okay, and just going, yeah, fuck it, the mobs. I think we just need to understand that the mob is going to always be there. There's always going to be some mob. I've gone through this as well. There's always going to be some mob that's mad at you, and you just keep going, keep doing what you do, and use that to your advantage, okay, in an ethical fashion. Don't manipulate people. There's we need an ethical framework for the advertising industry, which I think is coming. Facebook have announced that you can't manipulate and target people based on political affiliation and sexual orientation and those sorts of things, which is fantastic. I think you'll see a massive, massive change because Facebook is very, very good at radical. I hope Tumblr do the same thing. I hope that all these other places actually start to clamp down on this stuff because I think that is actually when Facebook, there's actually subtext there. When Facebook said that you can't target people with sexual orientation, I think that means that they're aware of this stuff, because there's a lot of ads that are targeting girls that identify as like sort of pan or all that stuff because they've been told, at school that they've got like they're pansexual or whatever when they're just they're figuring stuff out. So they put that on their profile, and then what happens is there's ad campaigns that sort of convince them and nudge them that they're trans, and that's actually happening. That's deliberate. Okay. The fact that they're doing this is actually, you probably see some positive change in your friends as well. People who are on Facebook losing their minds, because I hope that, that Facebook are aware of this stuff. Well, if I am, they are, because they're smarter than me. I'm dumb, right? I'm a fucking idiot. But compared to the people who work at Facebook, I'm just critical of them, and I know my industry well. But I think that they're doing well. So I think give them a shot. I'm going to go. It's been an hour and 25 minutes, and that's too long, and I feel drowsy. I'm on painkillers. Just in case I see someone, if you watch and I'm like waffling like a motherfucker and I'm like this, it's because I've increased my dose of Lyrica for my neuropathy, and I took my my dexamphetamine with it, and that just fucking put jet fuel on the Lyrica. So I'm like fucking, I should have read about the interaction before I scheduled a stream. But that's okay. I'm going to go. I love you. Things are okay. I'm going to work on my newsletter this week. I'm on Walk-ins Welcome. Like I'm recording it next week, but I'm not sure when. But I'll let you know when it's coming out. Thank you for not watching. Thank you for your precious life seconds. I'm setting up the members only area today, as soon as possible. I'm going to do a podcast today, because I need a couple of episodes ready to go for when I appear on Walk-ins Welcome. And I need people to land quickly on stuff. And I hate my website design, and I can't start over. Just going to have to fucking... I sort of went too far deep and too elaborate, and now I don't like the design. But that's all right. I'll tinker with it. I'm going to go. If you want to be a patron, that would be cool. But I can't see why, because it's a... But yeah, there will be ways for you to support me soon. Thank you for your patronage. Thank you for everything. I'm sorry this was shit, because I'm absolutely fucking fried. There's lightning in the back of my eyes like all the time, so good-o. But that's good, because it might actually help my MS come out, which is what I think it is. Anyway, I love you. Thank you for your precious life seconds. I'm going to go. Everything's going to be okay. I talk shit. It's good. I'll be back sober. Maybe Friday. Okay. Love you. Bye.